changing. And when everything changes that much, I think that is an opportunity for us to recreate.
If everyone has these tools at their disposal, one of the things that's really going to separate companies is going to be their brand.
Because I truly believe that to do branding correctly, you need to be a marketer first. I do notice on LinkedIn that people want more than just professional content. If you want to attract the right person, you have to reflect what you want to attract. We don't tolerate assholes at Duolingo, but because we're based in Pittsburgh, it kind of naturally vets out those personalities.
Lots of potential opportunity in talent branding. What advice you'd give to them when they're thinking about talent brand? Welcome to Hiring All Cylinders. I'm Chris Abbas, and today we're talking about talent brand with Jocelyn from Duolingo. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. I was listening to the old podcast earlier, and time has flown.
Yeah. 3 years. 3 years. Yeah.
And the world has shifted a lot, it seems like a lifetime ago, but also what you're doing has completely changed, which we'll dive into in a bit. But first, there was something that you said that was really interesting during our last podcast, which is you like to use metaphors at Duolingo. And the metaphor you had then was building rainbows. So I'm wondering, have you got a new metaphor for 2025? And what is it?
Yeah, every year I have a new metaphor. And I'm a fan of metaphors because sometimes ideas are so complex, it's hard to remember like what you actually need to focus on. And so metaphors help you root in that one simple thing. So when I had the metaphor of building rainbows, at that time I was global head of talent acquisition. I've now started a new chapter, which is heading up talent brand. And so actually the metaphor that we have for talent brand this year is recreate. And it goes right in line with what you were mentioning of like so much has changed in the past 3 years, not just in the HR talent space, but also in the world, in politics, like economic, like everything is just changing. And when everything changes that much, I think that is an opportunity for us to recreate. And I see that opportunity with talent brand as well. For whatever we want it to be, we actually have the opportunity to define it the way we want it to be, not what the industry wants it to be. So that's the metaphor.
I love it.
Yeah.
And so you just mentioned there the journey you've gone on. And so you started in marketing.
Yep.
You moved to talent acquisition. Now you're back in marketing under the marketing team in talent.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me about that change? Like why you decided to do that, kind of your excitement around that role, and how you being in TA has kind of shaped how you're approaching.
Yeah. So I've always looked at TA recruiting through a marketer's lens. So when I studied advertising and marketing, it's like you have to understand your target audience, what makes them tick, what makes them buy. Well, I looked at that with recruiting of understand your target talent, what makes them buy the job. And so I've always looked at it through a marketing lens. I was very intentional and also grateful that we can look at talent brand through a marketing lens here, because I truly believe that to do branding correctly, you need to be a marketer first. But a lot of organizations, when they approach talent brand, they approach it from HR first, trying to be a marketer.
Interesting.
No, I love HR. I obviously spent most of my career there. I also love marketing. I think there's a time and place for each of those to lead. And I think to truly do talent brand correctly, you have to do it from a marketing lens first.
Yeah. I've been speaking and thinking about, how talent and companies in general are rolling with like AI and automation.
Yeah.
And one of the kind of ideas is that I've been thinking about is if everyone has these tools at their disposal and can use, all these different sourcing tools and AI to find and engage candidates, one of the things that's really going to separate companies is going to be their brand. How they amplify that to the world. So I'm really interested when you started the role and you're starting to think about talent brand, the Duolingo, what are some of the things that you're thinking about, the first kind of foundation pieces you're putting in place, and how you're thinking about the future of the function?
Talentful provides flexible recruiting solutions to the world's most ambitious companies. Are you thinking about ways to add flexibility to your talent function? With recent market volatility and hiring set to return to growth mode in the near future, there's never been a better time to choose the right partner to help you scale. Talentful's embedded sourcing, recruiting, coordination, and talent advisory services have been trusted by the world's leading brands. Companies such as Atlassian, Microsoft, Expedia, Pinterest, Waymo, and more. Whether you're hiring across engineering, go-to-market, or G&A, Talentful has got you covered. To find out how Talentful can help you, visit talentful.com.
So this is our first year that we are a year in like a month in. But when I think about why did we approach talent brand this way, I started first looking at talent from the macro lens, and I look at what typically would disrupt how we do recruiting. So there are things in the past from technology of like, okay, you used to like mail in apps, then fax machines happened, and that really changed things. Then applicant tracking systems happened, and that changed things. And so when you look at how frequent are these changes happening, the gap in time is actually getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So every single year now, there's probably going to be something disruptive. What is interesting is on the sourcing side, what really disrupted sourcing was big tech. But now the new disruption that's actually going to solve sourcing for us is AI. Meanwhile, you compare inbound recruiting, and while all these changes have been happening on the sourcing side, nothing's really changed at all on the inbound side.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that is where talent brand comes in. So we actually tie ourselves very heavily to, are we helping generate inbound applications? So yes, we want to generate love. So we kind of are like this funnel on top of the TA funnel. Yes, we want to generate love, but to attach us to our business impact, people had to have heard about us through LinkedIn when they applied. And that's how we measure our impact. But one thing unique about Duolingo is about 50% of all of our hires actually come through inbound applications. And when I joined Duolingo 6.5 years ago, we didn't have any recruiting. Like that's why I was hired. And majority of it was all word of mouth and inbound. And so one of my goals is as we progress as a company, how can we make sure that the love continues to grow? Whereas most companies, as they grow up, the inbound actually gets smaller and smaller and smaller, which long-term hurts them. There's less efficiency there.
And so you mentioned there, like really driving inbound applications to the business. And it sounds like from those conversions that you're saying, 50% of the hires is quality inbound too.
Yeah.
Like how are you ensuring that you're getting people that actually can be hired? Funnel.
Oh, I love this question because it goes back to a metaphor, and the metaphor is dating. It's if you want to attract the right person, you have to reflect what you want to attract. So I'll just use me as an example from when I was single. It's like, oh, I really like people who are into soccer, right? Wherein I needed to make sure I reflect that. Otherwise, I'm not attracting the right person. So we do that same thing with our talent brand is, hey, we really want people who are mission driven and have these specific values and are high in craft. And guess what? You also have to move to Pittsburgh and New York. These are all kind of spicy takes. When people say, you're requiring people to go into office in Pittsburgh, you're crazy. We actually lean into it. Because what we found is when we lean into these things that are so core to our identity, we actually attract the right people. We put the right energy out there. So I think it's not shying away from things.
Yeah, there's definitely some just general wisdom there, I think, for sure. I think companies make mistakes when they try and be everything to everyone.
Yes.
And I really respect companies, regardless if I agree with what they're doing, that are very clear about what they do and who they are and who they're not as well.
Yeah.
So that makes a ton of sense. And you're aiming to make Duolingo like a famous employer. That's one of the statements. So definitely not a small vision, and specifically for top technical talent. So what does that mean to you? Like, what does fame mean? Like, how do you know if you've achieved that goal?
Yeah. What I mean by fame is there's one that's very specific to LinkedIn. So our primary platform for talent brand is LinkedIn. And we treat LinkedIn the same way we treat consumer platforms, consumer social platforms. So just like how we became famous on TikTok for consumer brand, we aspire to do that on LinkedIn. So if you look at the content that we produce on LinkedIn, it's not your standard like day in the life of content. It's kind of unhinged, but in the lens of LinkedIn. And what we found in our comments from our fans is they love that we bring a breath of fresh air. And so when I say fame, it's I would like for people to really love our content. They share it with their friends. They don't just look at us as this company. They look at us as this like entity that they can actually have fun in a relationship with. I don't think there have been many companies that have built actual relationships with their talent And I mean like emotional relationship between their talent and their company. They've done that with consumer and product, but talent and company, no one quite yet has done that. And that's what I would love to do. How do I know when we've become famous? One, people are talking about us. And two, people are mimicking us. When someone mimics us and can't really replicate it, that's when we know we've done something special.
Yeah.
And that's when we're proud of it.
That's great. And you've mentioned like the focus on LinkedIn a few times. We've at the pace of how technology is advancing and the different tools that may be out there. Do you think that LinkedIn's going to continue to be the place, for the destination for talent to connect with the companies? Do you think they're going to keep up and they're going to maintain that position?
Ooh, I think you should invite LinkedIn as your next podcast. We do for people, yeah. So I'll share my perspective. This is my own perspective. Of course, LinkedIn know they're behind the curtain things that they're doing. They have a monopoly on the talent community.
Yeah.
So they're the platform that most talent are on. So I think that is a challenge for other competitors. Will it always be the destination? I don't know. I do notice on LinkedIn that people want more than just professional content. They want authenticity. They want companies to produce videos that aren't polished. In fact, we produced a very polished video and it did terribly on LinkedIn. And we did some shitty one where it's like kind of lo-fi, vertical, and it did great. So that's just a signal to us. I don't know if it's more about the platform, but more of the content that talent is after. They want to see the real truth.
Yeah.
And whatever platform can offer that, I think that's where talent will go.
Yeah, it's so interesting, being in talent for a long time and speaking to a lot of different talent leaders, there's been lots of companies that want to disrupt LinkedIn. And that's great, but whenever you speak to talent leaders and you say, where are the majority of your hires coming from a kind of outbound source or inbound, it's always LinkedIn. And it's no one else is really making a dent still.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see if that changes and if they keep up. But I think they're in a great position. And I'm on it every day. I must be a super user, but I'm really fit by now. You just drew the parallel on TikTok brand and LinkedIn brand. You mentioned there that you're also running kind of different types of content, so polished, kind of unpolished. How do you think about the content you're creating? Kind of what kind of experiments? How do you come up with ideas? What's that process look like? And I guess for people out there that are thinking about experimenting with content themselves, like what's working and what isn't?
Yeah. So this is why I think for us, our talent brand, our secret weapon being in marketing plays a big role, because we approach content the same way that we built our consumer brand. So we sit in a room 2 times a week and we just come up with random ideas and we say, which ones do we want to pursue? And then we don't get too precious about it. We don't worry about it being perfect. We always are in it for the learning. So if there's a post that just got 300 impressions, we figure out what is that learning and we apply it to the next one. So literally every single day we are iterating. That's how we've been able to build so quickly in just 1 year. But every post that we have, there's always a learning attached. So we know what doesn't work and what does work, but we have to get very analytical with that.
That's great. And I guess maybe for people that are thinking about really focusing on talent brand, what does your team look like? Like, what's that made up of? Like, who's involved in this process? Like, do you need a huge team? Is it a lean team okay? Like, if you could talk more.
Yeah. So most people, they're like, oh my goodness, you have like 725,000 followers all of a sudden, and you're pumping out content every single day. You're getting thousands of likes a day. So 500K impressions on each post. Your team must be huge. I'm like, actually, it is just 2 full-time employees and 2 contractors.
Wow.
And that is it. And we built this thing from the ground up. And we're getting a lot of traction on it as well. And I mention that because I think that what will make a talent brand great is creativity and knowing yourself. If your team is very large, one of those things probably isn't there. Either creativity or you don't know yourself enough.
Yeah, that's why I felt that would be the case, what you just said. But I think a lot of people have the idea that you need these huge teams to deliver this kind of result.
Yeah.
So the contracts in full-time, did you purposely using kind of flexible contract talent for certain areas of the talent brand? And what does that look like? How do you
Yeah.
designate different pieces of work to them.
Yep. So it's intentional because what makes us different is our content. And what makes our content different? Creativity. And what's the biggest barrier to creativity? When you're in it too much. So we need external perspective. So having contractors, 50% of our team, 4 total, but 2 contractors, they bring perspectives that we never would think of because we're full-time at Duolingo, looking at Duolingo all day long. At the same time, they also bring a candidate perspective, whereas we have much more of an employer lens on things.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
And if you look at the content that you create, it's kind of fun, playful, like you're mentioning. How do you balance that whilst maintaining kind of the professional, being taken seriously? It's quite a hard balance to kind of get right. So how do you think about that?
Yeah, so we have this general rule. I don't like rules too much, if you can't tell. So I say general rule. It's 80% informative, 20% fun. So one example I like to use is we could say the exact same sentence. I could say, my favorite color is green. And you could say, my favorite color is green. Well, yours is more engaging.
Yeah.
Right. So the information is the same, but the delivery is different. So every piece of content that we make, we always make sure, is it rooted in a talent truth? And is it informative? If it's not, then what's the purpose of it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, just the delivery versus the content. You're not putting out like crazy content that's like going to be offensive or like too well. It's just the way you're presenting it.
Right. I mean, we've done some weird things. Like we're like, this is what it's like working on Duolingo's back end. This is what it's like working on Duo's back end.
Yeah.
But it's still informative. It's like, hey, we hire designers and engineers, and this is what it's like working at Duolingo. You literally do have to draw his butt. And that is actually informative, right?
That's pretty funny. Yeah, I like that. And your transition from the TA team into talent branding, you now sit under marketing, which is kind of unique in some senses. But I think sits with what you were saying before, that you really think that it's more marketing focused than it is HR. Has it changed the way that you think about employer branding, that it's the way that it's seen in the company? What do you think are the big differences between it sitting under HR and TA?
I think when it sits in marketing at Duolingo, because we have been so successful in building a consumer brand, we get much more credibility and much more resources on being free to build our talent brand. So we've seen that our internal employees actually are really champions of what we do. And organic love is the ultimate compliment.
Yeah.
I think anytime something comes from HR, and I say this as a former HR person, but something that comes from HR typically is like, oh, it's coming from HR. But like, is it authentic? Same way, like if something comes from finance or legal, right? There's just a little bit of skepticism there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. So yeah, it has that more consumer feel to it.
Yeah. We can even collaborate with our consumer social team as well. We tried a few TikToks. They didn't work, but we tried it.
Do you leverage the same kind of tools and tech that the consumer team uses as well?
We do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like we can even measure the sentiment on LinkedIn. Is it positive? Is it negative? Where are the emotions? Where are keywords that people are using? And that makes us and our work much more intelligent, and we can move quicker.
Definitely. Yeah, I can definitely see how that would be a big benefit. And, your company has a high bar for talent, and you're trying to really target the top 5% of the market, which I think has, a high level of difficulty than, maybe companies that don't do that. So what's your playbook on attracting that talent, engaging or standing out to that talent? Because, it's very competitive. There's lots of really, highly funded companies in that space going after the same people. What makes you stand out?
Yeah, I think it goes back to being true to who you are. And also every piece of content we put out, we always do a litmus test of, is it only at Duolingo? Is it ownable? So many companies in tech are like, we're looking for an iOS engineer. And they think, oh, if I do paid promotions behind it and people say it 10 times, the iOS engineer will finally die. That's not actually true. Sometimes it is, but it's not as effective. Whereas if you tell the story behind what makes iOS work at Duolingo unique, and how you can really change the world through your work and how you're helping people all around the world, people might be like, oh, that actually might be worth moving to Pittsburgh for. Like, I'm not getting that in my current role. So I think it's all about, is it ownable? Is it a story that is unique?
Yeah. And you just mentioned something that I think is unique to Duolingo, which is the location.
Yeah.
And how important part of the kind of story that is to the brand. So most of your team is based there. It's a smaller tech hub in comparison to like a San Francisco or a New York. You just mentioned it there, but how hard has that been, I guess, for companies out there that maybe aren't in one of those locations but are looking for really top tier talent? How hard has that been, and what's the journey been like on you really building that brand or that destination for people?
Yeah. So our headquarters in Pittsburgh, it's always been a challenge since day one. In fact, I remember in my interview with Luis, our CEO, when I was interviewing for head of TA, he said, are you scared about trying to get people to Pittsburgh? Like, it's going to be hard. I don't know if I can do it. I said, I'm not worried about it. Like, I experienced this when I was in Austin. And at the time, no one wanted to move to Austin. Now everyone wants to move to Austin.
Yeah.
So there's macro level, something going on there with cities. But at the same time, I think it all comes down to storytelling. People move to Pittsburgh for Duolingo. That is very different than, let's say, people moving to New York to work at a company because they like New York. So I actually think with us really leaning in on being headquartered in Pittsburgh, it naturally vets out some of this, like, I don't know a better word for this. Hopefully this is okay. We don't tolerate assholes at Duolingo. And guess what? I think there's a high density of assholes in Silicon Valley. But because we're based in Pittsburgh, it kind of naturally vets out those personalities. And we've recognized that. We've had to be realistic and that it will take longer to hire. But that doesn't mean we should shy away from our story. In fact, it means we should lean more into it.
That's really interesting, especially the part where you said that there's maybe an understanding that it takes longer. Which is really interesting. One of the things that also potentially might make things take longer is your approach to return to office and having folks in the office. And again, that's something that you were just talking about this earlier. You were very early on, being that this is our culture, this is what we stand for, this is how we work. And a lot of companies are now following suit. I was saying that almost every company I speak to now is moving towards kind of some type of return to office. So how do you make your kind of office somewhere that people want to come to? How have you made that work? Because there's been a lot of conversations, I think, with return to office that people are just sat in phone booths in the office or not having the people that you need to be with in the same location. So I guess what are the things that make it worthwhile?
Yeah, we have an incredible team within People team called Workplace Experience. And they look at, their job is to make the office an incredibly delightful place. And they look at building out our workplace experience the same way we look at building out our product. So when you open up the Duolingo app, you're suddenly motivated to learn. There's so many like delightful moments. It will make it easy. Same thing with our office. The team maps are like, what is the user experience there? Even down to like, okay, people really like this kind of chocolate. We're going to A/B test it. And then the size of chocolate, where we ran it is people want single serve, not the whole bar. But like we approach literally the office just like we do our product. And I think when employees see that change and that iteration, it's a signal of care. It's like, they heard my need and they made changes because of it. I think so many companies that have returned to office haven't actually made changes based on employees. And that's when I think it creates some tension.
Yeah. Another interesting point is that because Pittsburgh is such a central kind of location to what you're doing, how much does your team have to leverage their insights about Pittsburgh as a place, as well as the company that, Duolingo? Do you have to really sell the place? Do you have to research? Do you have to, really showcase the location?
Yeah.
Manage that.
So it's interesting. I think we get questions more of why Pittsburgh instead of is Pittsburgh a cool city? It's interesting because when people move to Pittsburgh, they're like, oh, this is a pleasant surprise. I felt that when I moved to Pittsburgh from New York. And reality is most of our people who have relocated to Pittsburgh have relocated from New York, San Francisco, big tier cities. So we have proof that it's a great city to live in and our retention rate is 90%. I think people just don't know why we're so committed to Pittsburgh. So we've been trying to tell that story more of like, hey, Pittsburgh as a city actually raised Luis and Severin, our co-founders, and that they were immigrants and they met at CMU and they got their green card when they're in Pittsburgh and they want to give back to the city the same way that the city gave to them, right? And that shows a heart within our leadership that I think is so rare, and we just have to share that more. But I think Pittsburgh is actually quite easy to like once you visit. So we try to actually fly people in to Pittsburgh.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Really interesting. It's almost impossible to tell like how much the city itself is influencing that retention rate, but that's super high retention rate.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a theory there of we move quicker than our employees do. When I think about the places I've worked at where retention was lower, usually the employees grow quicker than the company. So then the employee gets bored. But when we look for people who are high achievers, and our own CEO is also a high achiever, we're constantly learning and moving. There's never a dull moment.
Yeah. It's really cool. So, I guess when you're looking at all of this stuff combined, and you mentioned the outcome that you want earlier, which was like more people coming inbound and your high quality talent coming inbound. How else are you tracking success? Like what else are you looking for that determines like you moving the needle on hiring and getting great talent into the business? Are there other things that you're looking out for?
Yeah, we always take a look at, these are more watch metrics, but we always look at our follower base and impressions breakdown of, are we actually reaching a relevant audience? The reality is we could deliver X million of impressions, but if they're all to people in nursing, it's like, it's a waste.
That's weird.
Not right. So we always make sure we're reaching engineers, designers, marketers, business folks. And from there, we're building long term of if we're actually curating our audience to be relevant to us, then eventually we can just start fishing there as well.
Yeah. And there's so much talk. Every person I speak to, like AI is like top of mind, and people are trying to figure out how they can use it in their own work.
Yeah.
How do you think it's going to impact talent branding, and like how you think about using it?
Yeah. So my flavor of talent brand, there are a lot of different flavors. There's employer branding, which I think is like recruitment marketing. There's talent brand, which I think is much more about generating content. When it comes to generating content, I think AI can really help scale teams where you no longer need a content army. You can have a team that is quite nimble and understands deeply what makes your company unique and understands the talent, and they utilize AI to guide in creating the content. One common example that we run into is, let's say, I'm just going to use an example. This is kind of a hypothetical one, where we wanted to do a post on why we're headquartered in Pittsburgh and why not San Francisco. We included an image, but we kind of had to cobble out together. It didn't look great. Whereas if we utilize AI, it could much more quickly generate an image, but we still guide it. And that's the difference.
Interesting. So it's going to be like an amplify the work you're doing and like create more efficiency.
Yeah. And I think the number one thing that I hear about talent brand teams that are under HR is we don't have resources. Well, in that case, see what you can do with AI, because AI can do a lot of creative content generation for you.
As a function, where do you see talent brand going? I mean, as you mentioned, there's so many different flavors, and I've been hearing about stuff like talent communities a long time, and building like really great community engagement strategy where you can have like a proper CRM approach to talent communities. And I don't really know that many companies doing that, and there's lots of different things that are going on. I think lots of potential opportunity in talent branding.
Yeah.
So where do you see it going? Like, what's your vision of where it will end up, and like, what's the best path for talent branding to take?
Yeah. So my take is communities will form if you give them a reason to form. If we create the communities and we're like, this is why you're meeting, it's much harder for it to compound over time. So right now, we at Duolingo are focused on the company brand. I think next for us to expand into is our employees and our executives. I kind of look at it like content creators. So all of our own employees, what if they were actually content creators? Our own executives, what if they were their own channels, right? We've noticed that Luis, his LinkedIn profile, more and more press is following it. And so he's actually putting out more LinkedIn content that is exclusive. And that actually has impacted the leads that we get for PR. So in a way, if we write about something on Luis's profile, we control what stories are being written about us and what leads are coming our way. So the main channel is Duolingo Company. I think the next ones are executives and our own employees.
So it's like leveraging the talent brand, like building the talent brands of your executive and leveraging that for ultimately the company.
Yep.
That's really interesting. And in that, I guess in that dynamic, is how much input does the talent brand team and marketing have, and how do they build structure around the executives? Are you working closely with them? Is it kind of letting them do their own thing with some guidelines? Is it like how much of an input or
one word that comes to mind, no one's asked me that before. The word that comes to mind is it feels like we're buddies. And I say that because how we approach it is every month we sit down with, so I work with Luis on his executive content. And every month I'm just like, hey, Luis, here are 3 topics that I think we should talk about. And he's like, all right. And we just literally use like talk like this about it. And we create content around it. We review it. Does it sound like you, Luis? And then find the right pictures. So in a way, it's like we are working together to create his brand. But that is unique about Duolingo in that our executives are very accessible and very humble. And literally it's just like, it's like this every month.
That's really cool. I do think people, it's starting to become a little bit more popular, but I think that's going to be a huge trend. Like utilizing talent brand, because you're seeing a lot now that, individuals inside the companies have a bigger following than the company itself.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I think it goes back to the authenticity thing. Yep. It feels like there's less of a hidden agenda when it's an individual versus like the company. That's super cool. I actually think that's a really cool trend that's gonna be coming. So, what else is coming from Duolingo? Anything else that's on the horizon that people should look out for?
I'm really trying to figure out how do we measure user-generated content. And I say that because when we look at our consumer brand, yes, we create content every single day, but at the same time, millions of people are creating content for us without us even asking them. And that is how we've been able to multiply our brand love from a consumer perspective. We're seeing the same thing bubble up in talent brand and on LinkedIn. More and more people are mentioning us organically. I want to figure out how do we multiply that, because organic mentions from people who aren't even affiliated with Duolingo, who might work at Google, that has even more weight than if like an actual employee talks about us.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Have you got any ideas?
No, there aren't any tools out there yet either.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you think there would be right now? Right.
I'm waiting on LinkedIn. That's why I think they should be a next podcast.
Yeah. And so, I think there's a lot of people that I'm definitely speaking to that are more excited about talent brand than they have been for a long time. So to give advice to talent leaders out there, kind of what advice you'd give to them when they're thinking about talent brand?
Yeah, I was sources from if I could go back in time and say, hey, Jocelyn, here's some tips for you. The number one tip I would give myself is let go of best practices. I mean, coming from an HR space, I was so used to being like, oh, these are like industry best practices, industry standards. And when I approached talent brand initially, I was like, well, every talent brand must need an EVP. So I did all this research. It was like 2 quarters of research, talked to our employees, talked to all the functions, and I landed an EVP, shared it with the company, and yes, it resonated with everyone. We never referenced this EVP statement. Ever. Now we live out the ethos in the content, which is join a life-changing mission that brings people together, but we never slap it on all our content. So I use that as an example of all the marketing books have said you need a tagline when you're developing a brand. But sometimes when there's so much change going on, you actually need to forget the rules that you've been taught, because guess what? We're starting a new era. And if we keep going back to what we know, we're only staying back there. If we had tried to slap this EVP on every single thing on LinkedIn, our content would be very boring. And I would probably be out of a job.
Yeah. Well, we should do this again in another 3-4 years is see where you are. You've like grown talent branding to this huge, amazing function, and I'm sure you'll have be hitting all these targets. Or maybe you're in a completely different role of doing.
No.
Well, thank you for tuning in, and please don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. Thank you.